Hello all, welcome back. We have already covered few steps of in part 1 we have already seen how we can set up Ethereum network, which is also covered in my blog until step 8. So what we have done in part 1 is basically we have created a Azure Workbench by providing some basic informations, advanced setting details, and then we have created Azure Workbench uh, resources. In upcoming in part 2, what we are going to do is we are going to configure a AD account, register AD Azure AD tenant. So we will see first what are the resources created in part 1 after configuring the Azure Workbench. You can see here in part 1 we have these are the resources created. In that there is the app service is basically the Azure Workbench. So you can see this is the URL for Azure Workbench, but this Azure Workbench we need to configure AD first, and then only we can upload any blockchain prototype. And another resources is API. So you can see here, this is the Azure Workbench API. This API will be helpful to interact or to integrate with another application. And we can also see there are a couple of other resources like Azure Blockchain as a Service and Event Grid, Key Vault. Key Vault will be helpful for storing all your keys, primary keys. And there is also a load balancer. And you can see here down there is also a SQL Server database. So as you can see, this is a SQL Server database. This is a SQL Server name, and this is all the settings for the SQL Server database. Okay, so let's first to start to add the Azure AD tenant. So what we'll do in step we have already opened the URL, and this is the API part. Now we are going to configure the Azure AD. So for going to Azure AD, what we'll do, we'll choose the Azure Active Directory. For me, I have already Azure Active Directory configured here, so which is name of Microsoft.com. And so for creating the Azure Active Directory, what you need to do is you need to launch the Cloud Shell. It will ask you the Azure Active. So I will choose my Azure Active Directory. It takes 1 to 2 minutes to launch the Cloud Shell. Yeah, so Cloud Shell is already launched here. Now what we need to do is we need to copy the below command, and select the PowerShell command, and if the account storage is not present, we need to create a storage. What it means is once you launch the Azure Cloud Shell, it will, suppose if you don't have any storage account, you are doing first time, and if you don't have any storage account, so it will not show. It will ask you to create a Azure storage account. So what you need to do is you need to this will show a option like you need to choose either bash or PowerShell. You need to choose a subscription, and then you can choose a create storage. So create storage will create a storage account for you, and it will launch the PowerShell or bash shell. For me, I have already Azure storage account created, so that's why it directly redirect to Azure PowerShell Cloud Shell. Okay. So what is the advanced setting option? Advanced setting option is basically by default it will create a cloud storage your current region, but if you want to change some other region, or you want to rename the storage account, so you can choose the advanced settings option and you can change from there. Okay. In next step, what we are going to do is we are going to copy this URL and execute here. So let me execute the URL. Why it is not found? Maybe I need to change PowerShell. 1 minute. I will just launch PowerShell. So it is asking, please enter the Active Directory tenant you would like to use. So if you can see here, what is in my domain, if you can see, my tenant name is in Azure Active Directory is this. So I will copy this. So it will ask you to redirect to this device login and authenticate your machine. So I will need to choose this code and enter here. After authentication, it will ask you, you will be signed Active Directory PowerShell for remote device and service, select back. So I will choose this. So it will ask you to close the window. Now I will close the window, and you can see here my Active Directory is successfully created a AAD application with this, and creating the service principal. Service principal basically is used for authentication purpose. Okay. So it takes a few minutes to update Active Directory account. So I have already covered all these steps. We have granted all the permissions. And now we can see here it is still in process. Just wait for a few minutes. Now successfully your workbench instance was successfully provisioned. So what we can do is we can just go into the you blockchain workbench part, and we can refresh here. It will ask all your permissions. So it is asking permissions for reading all the user profiles and for signing up. So I just need to accept. Now you can see here I have a workbench. There is an option given for adding a new application, and there is also for how many members we have. So I'm the admin for this account. I can add more members. So but it's not completed yet. So what we need to do, we need to add uh, few more steps to register our application, because whatever the applications we are going to deploy, so we need to register first. So now we need to redirect to Active Directory and new application registration part. So what we are going to do is we are going to go to the Active Directory, and we have application registration part. So in that I have already so you can see here today I have Azure Workbench demo. Azure Workbench is already created here. I have already created a application blockchain API. So if what you need to do is you need to go to Active Directory, app registration, and you need to choose a new registration, and you need to add the like blockchain API. You need to choose a account in this organization. So for single tenant, or you want a multi-tenant. What is single tenant and multi-tenant? Multi-tenant is like multiple organizations who can access your application. So currently I want a single tenant account. So within our organizations we want to access. So that's why I will choose a single tenant and the redirect URL. So redirect URL I can give like blockchain API or blockchainapi.com, something like that. But later on we will update this URL with the workbench URL. So what we need to do, we need to register this. After registration, actually I have already registered here. So you can see in my Active Directory application registration, I have already a blockchain API registered here. Now the next step comes is what we need to do is we need to change the mainfest file. What is mainfest file? So you can see here when we go to the blockchain API, in blockchain API we need to change few settings. So we need to go in this, and there is a mainfest tab. So mainfest tabs we need to change few settings like OAuth. Let me go, what are the settings we need to change? So there will be app roles. App roles initially will be blank, so you need to modify that app role. So where is the app role? So I have already modified the app role. In app role basically this ID we need to generate this ID, PUID. I will show you how we can generate. Okay, let me close the other tab to avoid confusion. Okay, yeah. So you can replace the text from by app roles from here. Okay, and after that, after replacing the app roles, what we need to do is we need to allow OAuth implicit flow. So replace to false to true. So what it is, let me show you. OAuth. Yeah, So this is the path auth implicit true. So I just made already from false to true. These are the few basic settings which we need to do. Okay, and what you need to do is you need to change the GUID. As I told, for the app roles we need to generate this ID, and this ID, what we can do, we can generate with in our machine or in some other machine also. It means like you need to generate the new GUID. So what we can do, we can just go into the Cloud Shell and we need to type new GUID. So we need to type new GUID and it will generate the GUID. This GUID, what you can do, you can just copy from here and you can replace here. So and then you save the manifest file. This is the only steps we need to follow to register our app as a blockchain. So after updating, it will show successfully updated application. Then what the next step is, we need to provide the permissions to read the profiles, what we have done in the step when we were doing the authentication for Azure Workbench. So what we need to do is so we need to go in API permission. So what it is, so let's go to API permission part. Okay, and then you need to choose request permission, the Microsoft Graph API, and in this you need to come down. So in the user settings, so you need to allow for user read all, and user read basic. So this is basically to read the profile from the Azure AD tenant account. After providing the AD access and permission, you need to save update permissions and just choose all and grant admin consent to your AD. In next step, when we have already applied all the permissions for that, for the Graph API, next what we need to do, we need to go to the user settings, and there is an option for suppose you want to allow some external users to do the transactions on your blockchain application. So in that case, what we need to do is we need to go to the user settings, and user settings we have an option for the external user, manage external users. So from the manage external users, you can enable the settings for allowing the access to your blockchain application. So what we need to do is we need to go to the enable externals and guest user permissions are limited. Change. So it's already guest user permissions are limited. So you can limit the permissions for the external users, or if you don't want, you want to allow, so you can allow from here. So this is up to you how you want to make the control your application. Now what we need to do is we need to go to the Azure app registration, and for all, so this is for all the applications. You can see here, this is a blockchain API, and in blockchain API basically we need to do the authentication, and now we need to replace the URL. What is exactly it means is we need to go authentication. Okay, so this is the URL what we need to change. So what we can do is this URL replace with your Azure Workbench URL. So what is my Azure Workbench URL? My Azure Workbench URL is this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this URL. So after replacing, I will just save. So this application will be updated with my Azure Workbench, because this is basically your app registration. So I have registered the app, I have authorized to give all my read access permission for this app. So that's why we need to register our app URL here. Now what we have done, we are almost done. Now next step is go to the enterprise applications, and let me go to the enterprise applications. Blockchain API, and in this we need to go to the user group and we need to assign the user as an admin. So this is already an administrator. So suppose if this user is not already an administrator, so what you need to do, you need to go to the profile and then you need to go to the assigned role. Okay, and you can choose the role whatever you want. So you can assign him as an administrator or or whatever you want. Now what we need to do is we need to add, now that this is the second step we have completed, we have registered our AD tenant. Now the third step is deploy Azure Workbench. So we'll see the third step, deploying Azure Workbench applications on in upcoming video. Thank you so much for seeing this.